Greetings, beloved of God. Did Paul ever go to Saudi Arabia?
You've been made wise by so much religion. You always know what to do.
Now, welcome to today's video where I'm going to go in depth with a portion of scripture in the Bible that talks about a location identified in the Bible as Arabia. Now I'm going to read this from the book of Galatians 1 in verse number 17. Now in this verse, Paul says that neither went I up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me, but I went into Arabia and returned again into Damascus. Now, this is interesting because it mentions two locations in relation to Arabia. So we are going to dive into the topic of today to decipher which Arabia is he specifically speaking about, because many have come with objections that this Arabia refers to present-day Saudi Arabia. So we are going to dive into this topic by the grace of God. Now, beloved, I want you to understand that there are three geographical locations that are described or that should be understood as Arabia, even in the times where the Apostle Paul lived. That is in the Roman territory or Roman Empire, which was ruling the world by then. Now, the three locations are Arabia Deserta, that's the first Arabia. The second is Arabia Petrea, that's the second Arabia. And the third one is Arabia Felix. So, now, the first one is Arabia Deserta. That means that it was the deserted parts of the Arabian Peninsula. Now, the second Arabia is Arabia Petrea, also sometimes called Rocky Arabia, because of if you know the location of Petra, where we have present-day Jordan and south of Syria. Now, we have also the deserted Arabia, where there was no habitation. It was a dry land, where we have present Saudi Arabia, the area that goes from Syria moving on to Saudi Arabia or the Hijaz. Now, if we want to dive in deeper, we have to ask ourselves, which Arabia is probable that Paul went into? Now, I'm going to deal with this in two ways. Now, the first one, the first argument that I'm going to present before us is the argument from proximity. The argument from proximity. Proximity in relation to the two locations that have been mentioned in Galatians 1 and verse number 17. And that is the Arabia, the proximity between the closeness. That is what I mean by proximity. The closeness between Jerusalem and Damascus. These are the two locations that have been mentioned, and they are very key for us to know which Arabia specifically is Paul talking about. Now, using the proximity argument, now from the three Arabias, which one is closer to the two locations that Paul has mentioned? Now, if you look at the map, it will tell you that the only Arabia that is close to Damascus and Jerusalem is Arabia Petrea. Arabia Petrea. That is Arabia Petra. That's the first argument. Now, the second argument that I'm going to use is the argument from internal evidence. Internal evidence, by that I mean what we can get from the Bible itself. Now, what we can get from the Bible itself is the argument that I call internal argument. Now, the internal argument we'll get from the book of 2 Corinthians chapter number 11 and verse number 32. 2 Corinthians 11 and 32. Now this recounts the encounter of the Apostle Paul even with this Nabatean king called Aretas. Now Aretas is a very interesting character. Now Aretas is the king who ruled the Nabatean kingdom. Now the Nabatean kingdom is the kingdom that is responsible for the area around Damascus. Now I said Aretas is very key, a key figure, because if you look at him, if you look at the name Aretas, even in the Bible concordance, you will understand that it says, this is how it identifies him. Even in the Bible concordance, it says that Aretas of foreign origin, that's the definition. And it goes on and says Aretas an Arabian. So that is another evidence that shows us that the Arabia which is being spoken of is actually Nabatea, or the Nabatean kingdom. So that is another argument that seals the deal to know which Arabia exactly did Paul go to. So we can conclusively say, based on those two arguments, the proximity argument and the internal evidence argument, we can understand that the Apostle Paul never went to Saudi Arabia, but he went to Arabia Petraea. So I believe that